do you focus on your audience, or how do you think about your audience? Do you think about them as like, oh, they're just receivers for what I do? Do you have more of a two-way kind of conversation with them? How do you think about your audience and how it contributes to your just experience of music?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think that's something that did evolve for me. That was sort of a learning curve. I mean, I started out as a sideman. I worked for 7 years just in the background and playing keyboards quite often in bands and some saxophone. And I was able to observe a lot of great entertainers, people who really had a rapport with the audience and were able to put on a show. And also making great music, and walking that fine line between art and entertainment. And I was able to sort of internalize, I think, a lot of that stuff, and respected it, and when I started making my own records, and I mean, I hadn't played a show as a solo artist until my first record came out. So I had to sort of jump fully into that world of trying to be a leader and connect with the audience. And I wasn't as good at it in the beginning as I think I've become over time. It was sort of having to learn. But, my wife always gave me really good advice about that, because she was able to watch the show and say, when you're playing your horn, you're sort of in the music. And then when you're talking to the audience, treat them like you're your friend.
Yeah.
And I had another friend who was a manager. George Benson's manager was a family friend. And he would say, you need to open your eyes. Don't just stand there with your eyes closed. The audience needs to see that you see them. And these are things that always stuck with me. And so I started opening my eyes and thinking of the audience as my friend. And I developed this knack, I guess, of connecting when I was on stage, that these people are here. We're all experienced. They're almost part of the band. That's how I think of the audience too. And so when I'm playing a song on stage, I'm looking at the audience, I'm making eye contact, and I'm just really relaxed and feeling like people are smiling, they're grooving, and I'm like, we're all in it together. And it fills me with joy, first of all. And that comes out and it touches them. And then it just is this tendril of connection. And once I was able to sort of hone in on that, for the first time, it was something just like when you're practicing, it's like, oh, there it is. And you can find it. And so that's just become part of what I do on stage now, and it's working clearly. I can feel that connection, and I think they can feel it too. And I think that's one of the reasons that the shows that I put on are successful, because it gives people a feeling.
Yeah, they don't, right. It's more points to latch on to, even to connect with your music, right? It's not just I like what I'm hearing. But then it's like, oh, remember when he was playing to me, or that thing that they all did, the band did, that we were doing with them. There's just more points of contact in connection.
Here's another point too. I mean, if I was going to stand there with my eyes closed and just play and not move at all, it might sound a little better. I mean, I might, if I was listening to a recording back, if I was listening to a recording back, I would like the way it sounded better, because all that interacting and grooving and stuff that I do, which comes very naturally, but still it does impede a little bit of your tone, or, you might have a flub here and there, but it totally would detract from the experience of the live concert. And I do think of putting on a show and making a record or recording something, completely different mediums. And so I'm trying to respond to the medium that I'm in. And that's, I think, what a live concert is. And, I think a lot of great jazz cats from earlier eras often did also respond to the medium and put on a show. And I think there was some crop of other cats that might have started to disparage that. And so I thought that was an interesting thing. I've just noticed from the side that a lot of people think if you're grooving or interacting, that's a negative in some way. That's another thing that I've
right. It kind of comes from that perspective of like, not ego, but sort of. It's like, well, what I'm playing is so good, or so interesting, that if you just hear it, even if I was just standing there with my eyes closed, not moving, you would be head over heels for me. But then what you're talking about is like, but that's not what we know happens in reality. There's a much smaller percentage of people that are able to really know what you're doing if you're performing in that way, to really just sit there and kind of like, they're more like listening to you than they are watching and engaging in that kind of performance. So yeah,
it's interesting. But it's another thing where really, you need to be true to yourself. And if you feel awkward and unnatural and you're forcing it and you're trying to do, but luckily for me, I mean, most of the stuff that I'm doing on there feels very natural. I mean, all of it does. I mean, just being myself and letting that joy come through in a way that's discernible to the audience. And
Yeah, you're not being
luckily,
inauthentic. I mean, it's not like you're doing like cartwheels. Like you're just doing simple. There was just simple
if I do
moves,
it,
you know. Yeah, not yet. You're just doing like simple moves. I mean, even just that is just showing you're loose. You're having fun. That's kind of what
Yeah.
lands on.